Can I be your superhero? Can you dig any deeper now? I gave you all I own, put you on this golden throne, but I'm a little stronger now. You cashed in on my promises, you know I'm too generous. Now I've learned to never help you out, 'cause I'm done cleaning up your mess. Found myself in my regrets. I've become a little stronger now, a little stronger now. You cashed in on my promises, you know I'm too generous. Now I've learned to never help you out, 'cause I'm done cleaning up your mess. Found myself in my regrets. I've become a little stronger now.
Yes, everybody. Yes, I know I'm about 8 minutes late. Thank you for reminding me in the chat room. I wasn't anywhere. I was watching you guys. We had a small technical issue, so I do apologize for being just a tad late. Thank you, and welcome to Beyond BMR. Of course, I'm your host, Bigfoot in Michigan Rob. Joining me in Studio B, as always, is the lovely Krista from the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast. Please subscribe to them on YouTube, if you will. This is the show we talk about anything and everything. Bigfoot and Dogman, time travel, ghosts and hauntings. Well, tonight it's going to be a very fascinating show because one of my favorite people, and I think she graces us for the third or fourth time. Yes, that's right. Varla Ventura joins us. And when I talk about talking about some different subjects, we're doing some mermaids, some fairies, the fae, maybe some monsters and mayhem. We'll get into it. Varla covers just about everything. Going to be a fantastic show. Thank you in advance for Varla. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. The Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, and Texas Front Porch found on YouTube. Thank you ever so much for that. If you like what we provide for you, the super chat's open. Is a great way to support what we do around here. And you all, it's fitting. We're talking some mermaids. We're talking pirates because you today can't become a BMR pirate. Arr! That's right. Join today. You get a picture of me with my pirate bandana, all swashbuckling 100% of me. You can get it right next to your name in the chat room. Join today. Super chats are open. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining. And most importantly, thank you for tuning on in. Without you, I wouldn't have a show. You can check us out on Facebook, on our About pages. It keeps you up to date with all the current events that we do have going on. I no longer have to talk about the Alabama Bigfoot Conference. We put that to rest. Thanks for everybody that turned out over there. That was a great time. And speaking really quickly about our lineups throughout the week, Mondays is Texas Front Porch, 8 o'clock to 11. Tuesdays is Beyond BMR, 9 o'clock in the East with the lovely Krista. Wednesday, Bart Nully Inhumanoids, 9 o'clock in the East. Thursday in the afternoon, right back with me, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock, brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Thursday, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast come at you at 9 o'clock in the East. Monica Rollins, Our Paranormal World, 11 in the East. The Blondes and the Booze are right back. If you need more woo with the booze, they mix it up for you just a little bit at 8 o'clock on Friday. Check them out once again. Truth or Tinfoil, Sunday at 6 is with Brandy and Randy. And if you like true crime, Tex finishes out the work week. Well, actually, Sunday's not a work week. But anyway, a lot of us work Sundays. I worked last Sunday. Tex, true crime, Infamous Minds. Check him on out. Appreciate each and every single one of you for coming in. I'm going to bring up the lovely Krista, making sure she's ready. She's on the phone saying hi to everybody, I assume.
Hey,
Hi, Krista. How's it going?
I'm good. I was actually texting. Letitia called me. I'm like, I can't talk right now. I'm live.
A person that's always in the chat room that does not know what time BMR, good old BMR, comes on.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I just told her.
I say the schedule every week for a reason. In fact, I was going to stop telling or giving out the schedule because it seems
She says,
mundane.
sorry. She says,
Yeah, it's just,
sorry.
I Letitia, it just seems, why should I keep repeating myself each and every day? But I guess I have to. Letitia. For people like yourself, I love Letitia. I met her in Alabama. Thank you, T-Bone, for the awesome super chat. Let's rock to get started. Thanks so much for the support, T-Bone, right off the bat. And I'm kidding, Letitia. Met you in Alabama. You're a wonderful person. You and Barton. I appreciate hanging out with you guys. We had a good old time in Alabama. So, and I got to do something right quick, Krista, before we bring up the lovely Varla.
Mhm.
I dropped that show on Sunday impromptu about my nightmares and my dreams, right? And I got an outpouring of great responses and comments, prayers, everything, because what I've been going through lately has been nothing less than horrifying. And for those that did not see my issue, it's on an impromptu Sunday night. I wanted to thank everybody for your love and support. I will tell you this. I got with my spiritual advisor the other day, and I went over there. I've known her for a very long time, and we got together. I showed her the video of the show, and she sat there and watched the entire 58 minutes of it in the entirety. So I sat on the back deck with her husband. We drank a beer or two and just talked about sports. And she pulled me in, and she immediately took me, Krista, to this place where we bought some sage, got some oils.
Mhm.
We walked through my house. She lit that sage up and and anointed everything. Then we sat down, did a prayer. She read some scripture out of the Bible. And you know me, that's not my thing, but I'm rolling with this because I've been plagued with this.
Mhm.
I got to tell you, I think there was from the bottom of my heart, and that very next night before bed, Krista, I must have had the best sleep I've had in years.
There you go.
And I don't even know if I had a dream. If I did, it was probably pleasant. Don't recall. But the power of prayer or the power of, casting whatever was torment.
Works.
Well, it worked for 24 hours. I'll wait and find out tonight, right?
Well, that's where you still, your intentions are still there. It did work. It's going to work again tonight and tomorrow night and the night after. So your intentions still have to be there.
Yeah. And again, well, the intentions will be there because I got to tell you, if you watch the show, you guys go check it out whenever you have an opportunity. It's on Sunday. It's called Nightmares with a couple ghoulish, fiendish looking characters on the thumbnail. I was really scared, and I think a lot of people in chat realize that because I got like 100 comments on that. People are offering me advice. So my thanks to you does not go unrecognized because you guys helped me. I got a lot of great ideas too from you guys, which I'm definitely going to consider. So enough of that. I appreciate it. And BMR, he's good today and it should be good for a little while longer. hopefully forever, right? So with that, I'm going to bring up a fantastic guest. Make sure she's all ready. Yeah, she's got the smile on. Is Varla Ventura.
Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
Varla. Well, hello. Hello, Varla.
Oh, hello. Nice to see you both.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. thanks for
Yes.
having me.
You know, Varla, it's always great. I think you've been on like at least 3 times, maybe the 4th time, because you are kind of becoming a fan favorite. I've always been a fan of yours from Dave Scott, because you can find Varla once a month on Dave's show.
Yeah, Space Out Radio. I'm usually on the last Thursday of every month, barring,
Some
the occasional things that come up. But it's been once a month. Yeah, it's been pretty consistent. I think we're going on our 3rd year of that. So
Yeah, no, and again, like I said, I've been a fan of Dave's for quite some time, and if I miss your show, I don't watch his live shows anymore, simply because of now I have a new schedule, so I can't stay up till 3 a.m.
yeah, because he's on the West Coast. So
Yes,
yeah.
so I do catch a lot of Dave's replays, but I make sure that I look for Varla, because you're always just so very entertaining
you.
and informative. So
I feel like you and Dave would be natural friends. I don't know if you've ever met in person, but
we never met in person, but we are friends, and we talk. When we talk, how Dave is. I mean, we're all busy, but yeah, he likes. We have a mutual respect for each other, and I guess we're friends to an extent. But I know we'd like to meet each other in person. He's disappointed every time I can't go down to Vegas or Reno, because it just never works out for me. But I do want to meet the guy in person, shake his hand, give him a big
one
old
of these
hug.
years. Yeah, one of these times.
Everything works out, right? It's all timing. Everything in life is timing.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't go this last this year to Vegas, so that was but because of the timing mostly.
Yeah, it's all timing, because we're all busy people. We just got to finish a conference in Alabama. We got a couple more slated for 2025, and
yeah, that
we're all
sounded
busy.
very cool. That conference you guys went to. Yeah,
It was a lot of fun. And again, we talked about this all last week, but the thing that I loved most about the entire conference was this: every person I met, and Brandy and Krista and Brandy, I always say them simultaneously because they're the blondes and the booze.
Yes.
I know it irritates Krista, I know, but every person down there was a subscriber or a follower of all of us.
Oh, cool.
And that was so, from me, everybody listening, that was so awesome. For those of you that made it, that makes me want to do this for another 10 years because of you guys out there in the chat. And if you're not even in chat, there are people who don't come in chat that know who we were. That was kind of nice. Nice.
Yeah,
really
there
was.
were a lot of people too that follow Bart and even that knew Jason when he was
Jason,
doing live shows.
I mean, I just mentioned myself and you in Texas. We're on all the time now, but Tex,
paratroopers. We had people come in and tell Brandy and I, that they were paratroopers and that they found us from Paranormal Roundtable, and so
so cool.
So it's really cool to know that you have a following bigger than you thought. So that tickles my heart. That sound all weird, but yeah, it's I had a little heart flutter, I must admit.
That's validating, right?
Great word. It is validating that we're doing it's validating we're doing a good job and having good quality content. And Varla, certainly you are always a quality guest to have on. And this show talks about all the weirdness. We've been doing a lot of dog mail lately, and and people love that. It's a big draw, but we're flipping the coin, everybody, because we're going to start this show. We're going to talk about a few things that I really love. I'm a water guy. I live in the Great Lakes state, and if I could afford a $1 million home on the Great Lakes, I'd buy it. That's not just in the budget. So, right. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for projecting that upon me. But mermaids, I know mermaids is right up your alley. It's one of your favorite topics. And I think it's a topic that's not talked about a lot on a lot of the shows. And I don't think a lot of people are really familiar with it because I know that you've done a deep dive into this, written books on it. By the way, which reminds me, all of Varla's books, she's written like a dozen books. All her information is in the link to this show. So go on Amazon, or go on the link, follow Varla, subscribe, buy her books. They're fascinating. It's not a waste. Whether they're $100 or $2, they're well worth your investment.
I
Yeah,
just
many
got.
of oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead, and then I'll.
I was just gonna say many of them have been around long enough. You can get them used if you're on a budget.
Well, hey. All I'm saying, Varla, they're worth every penny, whether you spend $1 or $20.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, what started out your fascination starting the show off with, and I'm fascinated myself, mermaids. What's up? Are they real or is it just folklore?
Oh, I think they're absolutely real. I think there's really, I think that especially if you look at the sort of Celtic lexicon of fairy and folklore, mermaids fall into the category of fairies. They're just aquatic dwelling ones. And so it's interesting that you brought up the Great Lakes because we definitely have more of association with mermaids in the ocean. And I think there's more sightings and more mermaid encounters and more mermaid stories and origin stories based in the ocean. But the very first, well, what we think is the very first mermaid story, or one of the very earliest, is one that goes back hundreds of years. It goes back to like Mesopotamian times. And it was the story of Astragalus, who was a goddess who accidentally killed the man that she loved and was so, some accounts say that she was so ashamed that she hid herself in the water and became half fish. Other accounts interpret it as she was punished by another god. I prefer to think that she just decided she couldn't live among men anymore. But that was kind of like one of the first stories of mermaids becoming not just an aquatic thing, but that where they were really half human. I think there were probably accounts of sea monsters and things like that before this, but really kind of the idea of a mer person started evolving, and it's been part of like Celtic lexicon, like the Celtic mythology for, always really. So yeah. And I mean, I think it's interesting that you asked, like, are mermaids real? Because especially even within I'd say within the paranormal community, but just in the community at large, people are very fascinated by mermaids and they really want mermaids to be real. But it's the thing that people kind of don't like. They'll like draw a line in the sand, right? It's like, oh, well, I think Bigfoot's real. I think, Dogman's real. Mermaids, I think that's made up. It's like, well, how can you draw a line in the sand with like these, magical creatures that have the ability to shapeshift so you can't see them anyway? So, but I think mermaids have this really interesting role. And you brought up pirates. The early map makers would put mermaid lagoons on the maps. That's not just something from Peter Pan. Like that was totally sea serpents, Kraken, and mermaids. It would be like, don't sail around that cove. We heard mermaids over there. Mm-hmm. And it was taken, very seriously.
It is taken. Well, I think I take it seriously, and I followed you for a little while now, and I think, and you make a great point. I believe, I'm just talking in general. A person believes in Dogman and Bigfoot, but to say, oh no, mermaids is a Peter Pan fairy tale, that doesn't really quite add up to me. Yeah. I think that, let me put it to this way. If you're in the paranormal field, the cryptid field, your mind is open to anything, anyways. So why not a mermaid? Why not a siren? Which
Well,
is another whole different story, correct?
right. Yeah. Well, sirens are like by classical definition, a siren is um, like half bird, half woman, but they're usually sea dwelling birds. And we
Yes.
sometimes just use the terms interchangeably because both mermaids and sirens have the ability to sort of project their voices to cause mayhem, bouncing the sound off rocks and such.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, I can.
Well, I'll just say really quickly too. We're talking about mermaids still, but when I brought up sirens, and I knew they were a bird of the aquatic nature, but here's the thing: you always hear everyone confuses this. It's correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more than I do about it. Weren't the sirens the ones that would cast off beautiful music to the sailors, maybe
Yeah.
the pirates, and they would follow the enchanting sounds, but it led them to be upended on rocks, wrecking the boat, and the
Yes.
sailors went to their deaths.
Yes. Now, in my view, they were guardians. And so that was a defense tactic to protect, for example, an island that had, a very unique plant growing there, or maybe a seer or a goddess that they wanted to protect from a giant boat full of rowdy pirates
Heathens.
showing up. And so, and frequently, and probably the most well-known example of sirens in literature is in the Odyssey, where the sirens actually sort of trap Odysseus and basically cause him to wreck, which then causes him to go onto this island and all these other things happen, but it's all part of his like great adventure there. But there's a witch on the island, and so it's implied that she's sort of in command, or at least in cahoots with the sirens, and the sirens would sort of perch themselves on rocks as you would be entering into a bay. And it's very easy to get disoriented when you're out at sea anyway. And so I think that also the mermaids on the map, if you think about it just logistically, mermaids can go out in the middle of the deep sea, but frequently they're seen and depicted frolicking about in the shallows. Right. And of course, in some cases, early mermaid sightings were actually dugong in the southern hemisphere, or manatees in the northern hemisphere, who have that split tail but are more human-like in size. And of course, you're looking at something from a distance. You are sleep and nutrient deprived, and this manatee is like, oh, look, I saw a beautiful woman on that rock. Now, I'm not saying they didn't see mermaids, but some of those early accounts were that. But manatees and dugong they like shallow waters. So from a pirate's point of view, avoiding a mermaid cove because you don't want your crew to dive overboard, of course that makes sense, and that's a very romantic approach, but it also makes sense logistically because your boat will get grounded on the rocks if you sail into mermaid infested waters.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that mermaids, and there's two different ways you can look at this. There are some accounts on mermaids where they're these enchanted, beautiful goddesses of the ocean that lure sailors.
Just going to ask that. That's one of my questions I wrote down. I know where you're going.
And I'm sorry, Krista. See, okay. Krista, she's like my sister. We think alike.
All good. A lot of people in chat are commenting. That's why I was going to ask.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. I've not really been reading chat. Thank you for everybody for coming.
We're too busy making eye contact with each other. So
yes, me and Varla, we got this going on, right? And so thanks everyone for coming in chat. Love you all. Thank you so much. So Varla, the enchanted, beautiful mermaid comes up to a pirate ship, or even in modern day times, right? Because they exist in modern day times, I believe, as well. It's not just back in the 1800s, 1900s. They lure you in. They're this beautiful creature, beautiful goddess that every man desires. And then when they get you, they turn into this creepy, ugly monster and they eat you. That's one thing that I've heard. And I've also heard that they've actually directed and helped pirates find the golden treasure that they've been seeking all this time.
Wow.
Those things are both true. Mermaids are both guardians and protectors, and they are, murderers, really, like fast way to your demise. So just to address a couple of the things you said. So yes, mermaids are frequently depicted as very beautiful women, although there are also mermen. Hair is long and flowing like the kelp, which helps disguise them. Obviously topless, that's how you know they're women, although there are plenty of early images of like medieval images of mermaids that are reverse. So it's a fish on top and little legs sticking out the bottom. The other mermaid depiction that I love is called a bifurcated tail, where the tail is actually split into two with two little like fins on the end, which if you look at an image of that, it actually looks like a woman with her legs spread open. Interestingly, a lot of depictions of mermaids exist in churches, and specifically churches in Ireland. And they were used as a way for a variety of reasons. From one level, you can look at it as a way, in much the way that the church would sort of include imagery and celebrations, such as, winter solstice becoming Christmas. They would include these things that were familiar to the quote unquote pagans in order to make them feel comfortable and get them to come into the dwelling, come into the church. But also mermaids began to evolve as a representation of, like, they were often seen with a bell or a mirror, and that was a warning against vanity, really. So some of the images that we have today of mermaids, like even the ones that are on the cover of my book, this is actually a hair ad from the 1930s, is where this image came from originally. It was like a woman's hair tonic, have beautiful hair like a mermaid. So mermaids are many things at once. They have also been known to help people with their fish catch and guide people, as you said, to the treasure, to the land. They can be protectors. I like to think, like many creatures that are not 100% human or not human at all, they're leery, and they can tell. And they can tell if you are of the right mind frame, and if your culture is worshiping them and worshiping the ocean and not taking too much, not destroying things that are otherwise sacred, you will in turn be rewarded. And there's actually a story in my book from a woman who's comes from the mermaid dreaming culture in Aboriginal Australia. So that's very cool. So you have the helpers, you have the sort of lusty mermaid that's been used. The imagery's been used in many different ways. And then you also have, I kind of call it the sacred mermaid. So I believe, and this came from just doing, already being very familiar with some mythical creatures and or supernatural creatures. But I'm sure we've all heard the stories of like mermaids. Like, I don't know if you remember that old story called The Soul Cages by T. Crofton Croker. He was an Irish author at the turn of the 20th century. And basically he kept souls in lobster pots at the bottom of the sea. Now, lobster pots are open on all the sides.
I was about to,
So it's kind of an interesting story for that reason. And he's sort of the keeper of the souls. But this is a sort of modernized, early 20th century modernized retelling of a story that I heard again and again. And so I began to believe that mermaids are in fact psychopomps. And a psychopomp is an entity or a supernatural being, or sometimes, half goddess or a creature of some kind that also the ghost of a person. Some humans can be psychopomps, but specifically it's usually a supernatural entity that helps dying people go from this world to the next. And it's pretty easy to die in the ocean, right? And so all of these sailors lost at sea, yes, the mermaids may have caused the wreck, but they also may be kind of keeping their souls, or ensuring that their souls actually have a proper burial and a passage to the next life. They show them where the light is. So there's a sacred mermaid also. And then there's the fourth mermaid, and that's the sort of like adorably, innocently, seemingly innocently charming mermaid that doesn't mean to drown you. They just don't understand why you can't breathe underwater with them too. I didn't mean to hold onto your neck this hard. I just really, really want you to come under the water with me. And there's lots of stories of mermaids eating, or like there's one story that I read about a mermaid who she traps this man by telling him that if she doesn't get home, her husband, like King of the Merrow, is going to eat her babies. And so this like nice man tries to lift her up out of the tide pool and carry her out to sea. And she's just a little further, and just a little bit further. And then before he knows it, he's kind of being pulled under. So they can be many different things all at once, and simultaneously. They have a very rich role across folklore, mythology, spiritual practices around the world. Any culture that is on the water or near, water is sacred. You can't live without it. So even like you said at the very beginning, there's spirits in the water, there's spirits in the Great Lakes, right? Yeah. So if they are not treated with reverence and respect, they can get vengeful. Who doesn't? So
and speaking back on the Great Lakes, I've heard stories. I mean, I've lived here my entire life. Even when I was a little boy, my dad would take me fishing, and my brother. And now, again, you have to remember, my dad started taking me and my brother fishing. We were 8, 9, 10 years old, and we'd go out on the boat. My dad had he didn't have a big boat. He never bought the bigger one. He had a 12-foot wood boat with a motor on the back. And we went out in the Detroit River to start in our early childhood. And so, of course, my dad, at the end of the fishing trip, we get about 8, 9 perch or whatever it was. Perch was predominant in the Great Lakes, especially the parts I fished. So, of course, Daddy-O would take us, into the bar with all the other fishermen. And they would tell I'm a kid, I'm 10, I'm eating this up, talking about mermaids and things like that, how they've seen them. And my dad would, go right with them. So I'm thinking I wasn't a dummy as a kid. Oh, they're just kidding the kids just to give us a cool tale. But as I got older in life and started doing some more research and dabbling in all this weird stuff, I come to the believing that, some of the stories that I heard from these sailors or fishermen, I would call them.
Yeah.
I don't think they were tall tales, Varla. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some pretty incredible stories, especially from people who have lived on a boat for a long time or go out to sea regularly. Fishermen or fishing on the Great Lakes. And I think there's, especially in Ireland, you really don't. Ireland's a really interesting place for talking like that, because it's totally exists within the culture. It's sort of like a known entity, like with all fairies. But most people don't go around saying like, hey, let's talk about mermaids. But if you ask the right person, they'll say, oh, you should talk to, John O'Connell up the road. He's got a story for you. And I think, the element of the story is also very important to the mermaid, because there's something, you said like tall tales, and it's called like fisherman's tales, right? Like people say that, well, the fish was this big and then it becomes this big, or, well, things are magnified in water. And so in our memories, they're often magnified on land. But I think that, the no two stories will ever be the same. And you could read a story that I wrote and read it out loud, and it's going to sound different, and people are going to pick up different things from it. So there's a very sacred element of those stories and learning things sort of firsthand like
Mhm.
that is very transformative in kind of keeping your mind open for the possibilities of anything really,
Mhm.
paranormal or otherwise. I always say that if you can't suspend your belief long enough to believe in mermaids, how are you going to find a cure for cancer? Like, you have to suspend the
Mhm.
belief that it's not possible. You have to suspend that belief, accept that it's possible, and then start with trial and error, right? So that thinking outside the box is where we get poetry, but it's also where we get great inventions. It's where we
Right.
have connections. So in a way, mermaids could actually save the world.
Mhm.
I think it's possible.
So I have a couple questions. First one is, how often are mermaids reported?
I think that mermaids were reported much more frequently until about the time of the witch trials.
Gotcha.
And by which I mean the not just the Salem witch trials, the medieval witch trials, in which
Right.
thousands upon thousands, specifically women who were thought to have supernatural powers, were
Mhm.
killed. And I heard this theory several years ago and thought that makes a lot of sense, because I did ponder that myself when I was writing the book. Like, who do I know that's seen a mermaid more recently? And
Right.
like all my books, I always put a call out like, hey, anybody got a story you want to include? This is what the topic is. And
Yeah.
mermaids, I didn't get a lot, but what I got was really, really pivotal, including
Mhm.
one woman who actually had a mermaid encounter in her. It was like sort of a hotel that had one of those like her hotel was kind of sticking out over the water, and
Mhm.
she woke up in the middle of the night and saw this like creature with glowing eyes. Actually sounded so much like the way people describe, like, not physically, it didn't physically look like a gray or an alien, but just the
Mhm.
glowing eyes and this sort of very supernatural thing and crazy hair. She even sent me a picture that she drew of it. And in the
Wow.
morning when they woke up, there was a puddle of water on the floor right there. So that was a really cool one. But I would say by and large, they're fairly infrequent. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
faked ones, of course,
Sure.
because you just, what's the PT Barnum? He just sewed a monkey to like a, a fish tail and called it the Fiji mermaid.
Right.
um, oh, did you see that lightning
I
flash in the
did.
back? Yeah, I've got a big storm coming here. So, um, but anyway, so I think that the persecution of mermaids kind of ramped up around that
Mhm.
time, especially in some of the British Isles and in Ireland. Mermaids began to kind of hide away a little more. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing you think with
Mhm.
Bigfoot. It's like if you were a supernatural creature observing the way
Right.
that humans behave, and you saw the women that could talk to you, that were the ones that came and harvested seaweed and that sang with you on the shore, and you saw them being
Mhm.
hung or burned alive, you would not show yourself.
Sure.
And then the other aspect of mermaids that is important with in terms of seeing, and this applies to all fairy creatures. The original story is that when fairies were in Ireland, they were at war with a human
Mhm.
race, and they were losing. And so Manon MacLear, who was the son of the sea god, gave them the cloak of invisibility. And many stories have like a cloak or a hat or something that makes them go invisible.
Mhm.
Some people say this is the mist that surrounds Avalon, is this invisible cloak. And fairies have the ability to use that whenever they feel threatened. So you tell me, you think about the state of the ocean and the plastics in the
Right.
ocean and the traps in the ocean, and also the deep dark crevices we haven't gone to.
Yeah.
And I would think I would go into those, hidden places a lot more.
Right. Right. What are they like as far as like size and stuff? What do
So
people
usually like human size or a little larger, but typically most depictions show them as being the size of a average human, but not
Okay.
particularly large, like
Gotcha.
a shark or like like a big white shark
Sure.
or anything,
Mhm.
great white shark. So usually like very human like. So that's why there's a lot of theories surrounding are they, did we split off from them at some point and they just stayed in the water
Right.
and we decided to go, evolve out of ooze or whatever?
Mhm.
Are they related to Atlantis? There's all kinds of wonderful ideas about that.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome.
You've mentioned a couple times during this show already about the association with fairies and mermaids. Now, is a mermaid a version of a fairy? Because I believe a fairy to be something quite different, but is it a kind of an offspring or just a subspecies or whatever you
Okay.
want to call it?
So I'll just speak for how I view it.
Yes,
People can view
absolutely.
it in many different ways. And I'll admit that I was heavily influenced by the Irish lexicon as recorded by William Butler Yeats and others, Lady Wilde and such. So I look at it the way you might look at the plant kingdom. So there's plants, right? But there's also there's roses, there's things that grow from a bulb, there's tubers, there's trees, there's aquatic plants. All of these things are different. They're part of the same greater order. And then you have all the different like families. So when you say subspecies, that kind of fits. Like it's basically, I think of it as like what Yeats used to say, that trooping fairies were the ones that would like walk over land. And then you have like the domestic fairies that are seen in households and like to be around humans and assist them in certain tasks and chores. You have flying fairies, you have fairies that protect mountains, you have fairies that live in lakes and streams, and they're not all just like these beautiful, helpful creatures. Some of them are just swamp monsters lying in wait, just waiting for a child to lose their ball in the bog,
Yeah,
Slip
right.
right in.
No, I got you. I get you. I kind of relate to that because, yes, everybody, I love planting flowers. And I have a garden and I try to cross pollinate flower species to create my own. I'm not very successful at it, but I've created one wildflower that finally is blooming. But yeah, I get that. And when I said species, I didn't even want to use the word species because I don't think a
Yeah.
mermaid is a species. Fairies aren't a species, right? I mean, species to
I
me
mean,
is
they
more of
kind
an
of
animal
are
or
in a
crypt
way,
in a
right? But they're
way,
kind of, they're their own thing. It's very difficult. I find the more I know and the more I learn about the fairy kingdom, the harder I find it is to define with the limited language that we have before us,
Mhm.
because we try and quantify things by our our own human terms, and sometimes those just don't quite fit. Like, do they exist in a parallel dimension? So kind of, I mean, sure, I believe in like multiple things happening at the same time. You could call that parallel dimensions.
Yeah.
That's just sure. And if you can use a cloak of invisibility and hide out right in front of me, I mean, usually you generally, at least people with an active third eye, have a sense. And then actually, and Krista, you probably love these, but one of my favorite fairy creatures is the Banshee, because the Banshee is a little bit more like a ghost than any
Mhm.
of the other fairies, but the name literally means of the fairy mound. So there's in Irish. So there's sort of this, like, not saying the fairy world and the other world and the underworld or the afterlife are the same place, because they're not, but there's crossover. There's
Right.
crossover, there's certain people who can come and go. But the Banshee has that, like, kind of a warning ghost vibe, like the lady in white. And a lot of the counterparts to the Banshees are identified as ghosts around the world. But in, by technical definition, Irish Banshee is part of the fairy kingdom. So
how did the Banshees get like a negative type? Because when you hear Banshee, when people say, it's like this woman demonic creature.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do portend death. So when you live in a society that is afraid of death, then it's going to get a negative connotation. But they're also very feared. You do not want to encounter a Banshee. You might want to see a ghost. If you see a Banshee, it usually means someone you love is going to die. And that is not a good thing. So they're feared. They're sort of respected, but they're also feared. But of course, like all things in a male-dominated society, anything that was negative and wild became equated with a woman, and usually a demonic and wild woman. So I think there's some building up of that as well. But they are actually typically female spirits. And like the Valkyries in Norse mythology, they're not dissimilar. The Valkyries are psychopomps. They help decide who's going to go to Valhalla and who's going to go to Freya's side, or who's just going to go hang out in the, in between worlds. So, and when they descend upon the battlefield, they have a terrifying cry. So there's some similarities there. And they're female, and they're winged. The Banshees don't have wings. They're not really they're shapeshifters in that they can appear like beautiful women or little old innocent women, and then they can sort of turn into this very fierce looking, with this woman with this or female like entity with this horrifying cry. La Llorona is another example of a sort of a counterpart of a Banshee in a different part of the world in Mexico.
Mr. Dennis Kerr, who just entered the show. Hi, Dennis. We just talked about La Llorona on last Thursday. Very fascinating. Yes, Dennis Carroll. Check him out, Hunting in the Shadows.
Okay. I will.
Yeah, well,
I do love the. There's also like another counterpart to the Banshee, who's considered I think considered part of the fairy kingdom in our sort of like shaky definition there. In Scotland, it's often a woman who is seen washing, like if you're preparing for battle and you see a washerwoman, and she's down by the water, and they're usually washing bloody rags. So that's a bad sign for battle. So that was a feared thing. And also Banshees, just getting back to kind of like, why were they so negative?
Now, really quickly, Varla, is the Banshee of the female persuasion 100% of the time?
I have never seen an example of a Banshee as depicted as male.
Okay.
Counterparts like warning ghosts and things like that, I have, of course. But it's usually a female entity, and it's thought to be women who died in childbirth, and so they're mourning. And so that mournful cry, which is very similar to like Irish keening, is endless, right? Because that's an endless sort of sadness. So that's one thought. And then some people also believe that they may be like La Llorona, that they may have harmed their own children or harmed themselves, in front of their children, or some things like that, where they would be like sort of forever doomed to moan. But really, Banshees are just letting you know it's time to drop get your affairs in order, because they're seen less frequently, I think, probably because of the advent of modern medicine.
Yeah. And they could too be misidentified. And I only say that because a very good friend of mine, everybody's heard me talk about him, who made the Sally House famous. So in one of the instances, he had come home from work, and what he described, and he says it in his book, it was a Banshee creature that attacked him, literally threw him all over his room, his dresser, turned everything upside down. And he says it was a Banshee. That's how he saw her.
Yes.
You know?
Actually, I have heard some accounts. There's an author named Elliot O'Donnell who wrote a whole book about banshees specifically, and he talks about what does he call it? The malevolent banshee. And this is the banshee that comes through and actually, with the sound of their voice and their own sort of like swirling chaos, can just ruin a house in
Yeah.
no time. They don't generally cause direct harm or death, but it has been said that that like people hear it and can't get over it, and or they're running from it and they fall off a cliff. So it's
Yeah.
Sort
She
of.
she didn't physically hurt him. However, this I find interesting is he was in there asleep. His wife was in the next room and she never heard a thing. However, when he was trying to yell for help, couldn't yell for help, dressers were turned upside down and she never heard a thing. So he came in the room and everything was a hot mess.
That's pretty interesting because by like traditional definition, a banshee would have been sort of inherited with certain places, such as like a family castle in Ireland. And then only certain people in the family would see it. But like, I've always wondered, is the family inheriting this, or are the family members inheriting the second sight and the ability to actually see it? Right. So that's like,
that's a good
where
point.
there's plenty of accounts where they'll be like, a grandmother saw it, none of the parents see it, the granddaughter sees it.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah.
A little bit earlier on, you mentioned something again about the mermaids, and we're talking about the pirates, the mermaids, and all this fascinating. It's great. I love this topic, by the way.
I know I could talk about pirates and mermaids for the rest of the year.
I think we all know what the Kraken is.
Yes.
Now, did the mermaids control the Kraken in the sense in which they inflicted terror on pirate ships, which the mermaids chose, that they just kind of wanted to do away with that group of guys or pirates?
Well, so the Kraken is part of Norse mythology, and that the belief was that it was usually sort of summoned by like the sea god or someone who was seeking revenge.
Okay.
But I think that the mermaids live in harmony with creatures like that.
Okay.
So I'm sure they could, it's like knowing a guy.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, we'll revert back. I'll ask the question a different way. Did the Kraken, are they a myth in your opinion back then, or do you think they did cause some of these ships to go down?
Well, have you ever seen any videos of the giant Pacific octopus, the Humboldt squids?
Yes, I have.
Those Humboldt squids that lurk in the waters off the coast of Mexico, like Baja California, and have tentacles big enough to pull down a boat.
Yep.
Also keep in mind, today we think of a ship and we think it's pretty big. But if you look at a replica of like a traditional Viking ship or another, even like, the Santa Maria or one of the like explorer ships, they're not that big. Then you add to that cold waters that are unexplored. Things are allowed to get larger because they haven't been hunted. They live longer. So my belief is absolutely that the Kraken existed and that, people would go out into the waters, and I don't think it was a mythological beast at all. I think it was just a really, really giant squid. And by proportion, it was capable of collapsing and killing. And they're good hunters. Masters of disguise. All the cephalopods, they're masters of disguise. They have, they're highly intelligent. We know this about octopus in particular, right? They're highly intelligent beings. They can change their camouflage to match anything in seconds, like less than seconds. They are very perceptive. So if you sense something, probably just looked like a real nice snack up there. All those like tall Viking men, just pull them on down. have a little feast.
Well, we're going to keep it on the same topic, but I have a question that I've been wondering for a long, long time, and it kind of fits the topic about pirates.
Oh
and
yeah.
their sailing abilities. First of all, everybody, you can become a BMR pirate. You like that segue? Join today. You get a picture of me with my bandana next to yourself in the chat room. Thank you so much for that. So, with that,
Love that segue. Definitely,
thank
people
you.
should definitely do that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for those that did. I got gifted 5 memberships earlier by you. In fact, I'll do that really quick before I get out the question
Mhm.
because I like doing this right about this time anyway. T-Bone, thanks for the super chat. Sugar Britches, the super chat. And T-Bone again gifted the 5 BMR Pirates, 5 new members of the 120 or so strong.
Love it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
That's a
Love
crew.
all-
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
That's
getting
a
a crew.
merry
That's
crew.
right. We have the crew started. And we have a little crew, a small crew, but a great crew. And I love each and every single one of my members and subscribers, people that watch, the people that aren't in chat. Y'all great. I love you. If you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Mystery Rob on YouTube, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, Texas Front Porch. My buddy Dennis Carroll's in the chat, Hunting in the Shadows. Check him out. And Josh Turner, PRT, Paranormal Roundtable, if not already. And of course, Varla Ventura, all her links are in this live show video. She's got a plethora, as Dave Scott would say, of books. Fabulous books. Get them, buy them, check her out, find her on the web, become a fan. I became a fan 4 years ago. With that being said, back to the pirates. They had to be those ships had to be really made very sturdily and better than perhaps even ships of today, because we've all seen the modern day footage of these vessels made of steel and that are, I mean, I've seen 20-foot waves that these modern day ships have hard times withstanding. Now, there's not depths, we get it, and then oftentimes are not capsized, although some of our cruise ships have in the past. These pirates are some fearless warriors on the shore. How they have not? How come? There should have been more pirate ships upended. I know there's $1 billion of gold still in the ocean, but they were some fearless, great sailors without having the instrumentation we have today.
Oh yeah. Well, you know the story of the Etosha, right? The guy down in Key West. Oh my gosh, I just spaced his name for a second. But there's a man down. So the Etosha was a ship that was sailing from, I think, like the east coast of South America, and was heading back to Spain. And it sank somewhere south of the Florida Keys. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name, because I went to his museum when I was in Key West. He spent his entire life looking for the Etosha. He knew he could figure out where it was. He was a diver. He was had born and raised in Key West, and he found it. He found it. And the state of Florida tried to pull this well, we get some of that because that's in Floridian waters. And he actually sued them. They went to court, and they put into act the finders keepers law, which is so great, right? Finders keepers. And he was allowed to keep the treasure. I think he had to pay a small tax or something. But if you go to Key West, there's a museum, and there they have all the treasures from the Etosha. And it was like exactly, and by the way, he found this in like the late 70s, right? Early 80s, I think. So it wasn't like 300 years ago he found it, or 100 years ago he found it. It was like fairly recently, and it's emerald encrusted goblets and giant gold coins, just all this marvelous stuff. But that museum also has a whole section on the history of piracy. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, the thing is the pirates always had the best ships, right? Because they just took the best ships. That's how it went. I was like, oh, our ship's looking a little worn. And it was the best ships because it was the British Royal Navy and like the Spanish Navy, right? So they had all the money from all the kings and queens, and all the robbery of the peasants. They had that to invest in these ships so they could go rob some other peasants on the other side of the world. And so it was like the cream of the crop, right? Beautiful captain's quarters, everything state of the art by 1700s standards. But do you know my favorite pirate of them all is an Irish woman named Grace O'Malley. Have you ever heard the story of Grace O'Malley?
No, I thought you were going to say the other one, Bonnie, whatever.
Oh, Bonnie. So there's Mary Reed and the other woman. Again, I just like spaced her name for a second. Bonnie. It was Mary Reed
Bonnie,
and
yes,
Bonnie,
and Bonnie,
who also were both Irish women. They were amazing, and they sailed with pirates like Jack Rackham, and like they went and did the whole Pirates of the Caribbean thing. Grace O'Malley she's known today as the Pirate Queen of Ireland, and she basically ruled the entire west coast of Ireland. And her father was a sailor. She wanted to become a sailor. She wanted to fight. This is at the time when the 1600s. So England was invading Ireland, and they kind of had a stronghold in Dublin. But the rest of Ireland was still under Breton law, which was clan domain, which women had a lot more rights in that in that situation. Wow. And basically, so there's all kinds of wonderful stories about her, like she wanted to learn to fight, and her father said no because she was a girl and her hair was going to get tangled up in the ropes. So she cut off all of her hair and stowed away on the ship and showed up when they were about to meet a Spanish armada. And she was like, well, you got to teach me how to handle a sword now. So some of these stories are very legendary, but some of them are actually like there's a lot of records in the history books. There's a wonderful book about Grace O'Malley by one. And now if I keep forgetting names, this is a little it'll come to me. Anne Chambers wrote this wonderful book about Grace O'Malley. But in any case, she ended up having like a huge fleet, like 60 ships. She had hundreds of men at her command. And there's a great story where she was married to this man, Donald Flattery. He was killed. A rival clan was taking over his castle, and she found out about it because back then, like you had multiple pieces of land and multiple castles, and you would ride around and go to all the estates and take care of things. She found out her husband had been killed in this castle siege. She rallied his men and took back his castle, basically leading the charge with her sword, so much so that everyone just said, well, that's your castle now. And they gave her the castle, and it became part of her estate, which was unheard of for a woman alone, unmarried, to have that. But there's all kinds of incredible stories about her. My favorite is that her son was arrested by this guy named, there was the Bingham brothers. They were like basically doing it was, Queen Elizabeth. It was during the Elizabethan times. So they were going around squishing out all of the clans and any kind of making everybody earls instead of heads of clan. And so her son got arrested on some bogus thing. And instead of just letting it lie, she sailed her ship up the Thames River, went to the castle and requested an audience with Queen Elizabeth, unannounced. Was granted the audience, probably because Queen Elizabeth was like, who is this woman? And the great story is that Queen Elizabeth really, they spoke in Latin because Grace spoke Irish and Elizabeth spoke English. They came to an agreement. Grace O'Malley became the only woman on the map of the clans in Ireland, and the son was released. But the best part about it, and this is the most piratey thing you could do, Queen Elizabeth said, I want to give you this title. It was like Duchess or something like that. And she said, you don't have the authority to give me a title.
Wow.
To the Queen of England. So she was, you don't rule me. They came to an agreement that she would stop persecuting English ships if the English would stop persecuting her family. And she went on to live. She lived into her 70s in one of her 6 castles. She was like the best pirate in all of history. I mean, really, absolutely remarkable.
I want to grow up
So-
and be like her.
I know, right? Yeah, she was just amazing, just fierce to the end.
Yeah.
One of her castles, the husband came back from sea, and by Breton law, if you were married for a year and you didn't want to be married anymore, you could just say this marriage is over. So he came back from sea, and she just opened the window and she said, "This marriage is over, and this castle is mine." And there was nothing he could do. I mean, I guess he could have waged war, but it was really best to just go the other way because.
Wow.
I mean, there's endless, amazing stories about this woman. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not, typically you hear, men being pirates.
Sure, and you hear of Jack Rackham, who was so fierce, and you hear of Blackbeard, who put fireworks in his beard, and he was actually afraid of mermaids. He would make his entire crew sail around what he thought were mermaid infested waters. He was really afraid that his crew was going to get taken in by the mermaids. And he was caught in the Carolinas. There's so many manatees around there. It's like he was probably onto something about wrecking there, but
wow. Interesting.
We could do pirates all night long.
Yeah,
I watched this documentary on pirates, and it was on Netflix, which I watched it twice. It was so good. It mentioned all the pirates you'd mentioned and then some, and some stories I never heard about. But keeping it a little more paranormal, let me ask you this. We know what the elementals are. What is that? That's beings that are comprised of what? Wind, fire, earth, and water, I believe. Would you consider a mermaid a part of the elemental group?
I mean, sort of. I think if you're dividing them up by elements like that, I would definitely put them in the water spirit category, right along with the Russelus, who is the really creepy woman that dwells in the rivers in Russia, in Russian folklore and Slavic folklore. And this thing has very, very long arms, especially in the rushing waters, cold rushing waters of late winter, early spring. It's got these long, craggy arms that reach out, but it's also a beautiful woman and can speak to children, especially can commune with the Russelus, or witches can commune with the Russelus and have it sort of help them. You can ask it because it's not just an entity. It is sort of, I guess, in that way, an elemental. It sort of has this more divine classification.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
You know what? Okay, I've talked to many people throughout doing all these shows, so I want your opinion, Varla, because I don't think I ever asked you this question when it comes to fairies and the fae. What is the difference? Is the fae the things that I've come across throughout the last couple of years, the fairies are more helpful, more of perhaps in the woods, where the fae could be something that could turn on you, much like perhaps the Jinn. And would you consider the Jinn a part of this group, or just something totally nefarious?
So I think that fairy and the fae are actually the same words.
Okay.
I think that they actually mean the same thing. I think the kingdom of the fae is a much more old-fashioned term, and today is used typically to describe something a little bit more obscure or perhaps a little dark, but technically they're the same thing.
Okay.
However, the reason I think that there is that association is because when you hear the word fairy, you think of Tinkerbell.
Mm-hmm.
You think of Tinkerbell. But
I do
J.M. Barrie was a Scottish man, and he was well versed in fairy lore, and so he is describing a type of fairy.
Mm-hmm.
But the fairy kingdom is much greater. And again, we have a lot of different words that we can use for them. And then the Jinn are there. I think the Jinn, I mean, they certainly fit in the wild entity category. That's
right.
Absolutely in that way, they do belong there with the fairies. But they are a thing in and of themselves. But like many supernatural entities, they can be used for good and for harm. And sometimes I think the thing about, so the probably the best equivalent to the Jinn, say in like Celtic lore, would be the Pookas, or in North American, Native American, you have a lot of like trickster spirits, right? Like in the Southwest, there's the trickster coyote. So an animal or a shapeshifter that plays tricks on you, but not necessarily to create, like, invoke deep harm, but more to just really shake you out of the path that you shake you off the path that you're on and teach you something. In Ireland, you have the puka, which appears as a horse, sometimes as a goat. Usually the eyes are glowing red. The horse has a long flowing black mane, also can appear as a rabbit. And it will shape shift and it will talk and it will, take you on this wild ride and completely play tricks on you. So much like the Jinn are very capable of doing that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been, I don't know, it's been several years. There was a time when, when somebody would talk about the elementals or things like that, I thought they were cuckoo. Honest to God, I did. I was like, okay, whatever. And I had heard of them, but I seriously thought, like, people like myself now were cuckoo for believing in them.
Yeah.
Until I actually did a paranormal case that ended up being, it was these troll-like creatures that was there, and we ended up like giving back to them. There at one time had been an apple orchard there, and everything had been cleared to make horse farm for horse pasture. And so we ended up planting some apple trees to them. And since then, we worked that case, I know, 4 years and couldn't figure out what it was. We did everything from ghosts to, like everything. And then once we did that, all paranormal activity stopped. The lady was losing horses. It was a horse farm, and horses were dying mysteriously. She had dogs dying mysteriously. And once she did that, all paranormal activity ceased.
Oh, interesting.
Still good to this day. And it was what it was.
Well, they do say something like that, where you're making an offering, much like we were talking about mermaids being more vengeful to someone who's, throwing their trash over the side of the ship versus somebody who is like harvesting to feed their family.
Yeah.
But like making that offering and being respectful, but it's interesting to find that out. But also the thing about that is, like you said, it took you kind of years to figure out. Yeah. I think we have like a lot of different words for some of the same things because of, different experiences in various cultures, other languages, the distillation of that, the interpretation of that. And so I found, when I was researching my book about fairies, there were quite a few instances. I was reading some of these like really obscure British, they were Welsh fairy tales. And if these didn't sound like Poltergeist, I don't know what did, but it was from like the early 1800s. This man had collected all these stories, gone all over Wales, kind of like the Grimm brothers did with traveling over Europe and collecting stories. And but just there was there in that book, there's a picture of this thing that they called a puka, and it has this really like sort of bulbous head, and it was gray and this tiny little body and these giant eyes. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen like somebody's drawing of like a gray, but it looked like that. I was like, wait a second, what's happening? And that's when I really started thinking about the lack of words, but are we just talking about the same thing? Did the Egyptians see exactly what we're seeing now, but they called it something different? Did the Celts have inside intel that we just only have like a little dribblings of, and we don't quite know what to call it, so we call it a fairy or we call it a puka, or it's interesting.
You said today, you sent me a text which I found interesting, because we were like, texting back and forth what we're gonna do for today's show. We said, well, we'll cover everything. And I said I didn't want to cover mermaids, the fairies, and the fae. And then Varla, you said I was thinking about also perhaps bringing up women of the paranormal, and I'm like, you know what? That's never been done. I don't think on any show that I've ever watched. So just for excuse my language, shits and giggles, everybody. I looked up on my my analytics in on YouTube, and 41% of my subscribers are women. And yeah, and so the other one would that be? I'm crappy with math. 59% are dudes. So, so yeah, right. So, but I like it. I wish it was 50-50. I'm getting there. I'm because I like to have a equal audience base, right?
Sure.
So when you said women of the paranormal, what did you have in mind? You want to talk about famous women of the paranormal?
Yeah, I
Varla
mean,
Ventura, are you a woman of the paranormal?
well, I mean, yes, I am. I think the thing that I love to talk about, and we probably don't even have enough time to cover it, so we should
Well,
do like a Halloweeny type show, and we
well,
can
Halloween,
get into
yeah,
this.
because
Yeah,
yeah,
like
it's
late
always on
summer, early
Halloween.
fall, or
Yeah,
early fall,
okay,
whatever.
okay.
And so the most, not the most recent book I wrote, because I have a book that's coming out in the spring that is the most recent book I wrote, but the most recent book that was published is called Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor. And that's full of my own paranormal experiences, stories from other people and their experiences, but my haunted cemeteries, all that good stuff that we all love. But my favorite chapter is I think it's chapter 3, and it's all about, so basically, if you think about our modern paranormal community and how the kind of investigations we do and how we try and connect and actually talk with the spirit world, that is rooted in, or that has evolved from the spiritualist movement, which took place in particular in the United States, but also in other parts of the world, Canada, Europe, UK, Ireland, Australia. It was very popular from about 1840 to like the 1940 or so, and it was really, really popular, especially right after the Civil War. We had a nation in mourning. You had people looking for answers. Now, the spiritualist movement, or spiritualism, is the idea that not just that you can connect with the dead, because that's not a new idea, right? It's obviously happening before 1840.
Yeah.
But it was the idea that you could actually get like guidance for life from the dead. This is where sort of like some of the modern like psychic hotlines and stuff evolved from this. And out of that movement, what's really so that's interesting enough. But what is particularly fascinating to me is that during a time when women could not so much show an ankle or really do a lot in terms of occupation, right? What were your choices? You, if you were real talented, you could be on the stage for a little while. You could sell your body. You could sell your body into servitude in the form of a house servant. You could marry well and then do whatever your husband said to do. You could become a nun. That was like a real way to go and be independent. So there weren't a lot of avenues to be an unmarried woman and do what you wanted to do. And yet within the spiritualist movement, you had quite a few women who had tremendous success as authors, as lecturers, channelers, all kinds of, and there's just all these very interesting women who kind of, like, I call it shattering the Victorian glass ceiling, right? Because that's really what they did. It was a society that had women, in corsets, in the confines of what you could and couldn't do. And then by, especially about, I'd say like 1890 to 1915 or so, women were making money. You had the Fox sisters were traveling all around. They were rich. You had women being published. You couldn't really be published as a woman back then. You could write a column advising what sort of pie to make, but you couldn't have an opinion. You didn't even have the right to vote. So you couldn't really have an opinion. And a lot of women were published under pen names, male pen names. But these women were sort of like rising up and doing these sort of outrageous things in society but with the template of the paranormal, with the template of conducting seances, talking with mediums, being mediums, channeling books, channeling novels. It's like, there's this one woman that I love so much. She channeled an entire novel through the Ouija board, and she said it was from the ghost of Mark Twain.
Mhm.
And it became this very controversial book because she used the name Mark Twain. And so
Right.
his publisher, and of course he had died years before, his publisher and the estate weren't happy with that. And it actually ended up going to like the Supreme Court, and they had to like discuss it. There's a great headline that says like, spirit board author goes to the Supreme Court or something like that. And they were really arguing about copyright, but just the sensationalism of it. But you had Mary Todd Lincoln was conducting
Right.
seances in the White House. Like, it was very like, it became this very it also overlapped a lot with the abolitionist movement. So these like forward thinkers who were believed in equality and also believed in the paranormal. And then they would like, they'd go to church on Sunday. It wasn't in conflict with the teachings of, like the church necessarily. It was sort of in just pursuit of this other understanding. And out of that movement also, you had many things that we know today, like the Golden Dawn, the Ghost Society, the OTO, which is the Crowley's disciples. So there was a big movement toward trying to understand things that that we couldn't quantify, and to reach out to the spirit world and have them guide us and tell us what to do. I still kind of want that, I pull a card every once in a while, right? I'm like, better pull a card today and see what spirit wants me to do. But that's the same principle. Not that Tarot obviously predates this, that goes back hundreds or if not thousands of years, all different kinds of fortune telling, the I Ching, all of these things. But the spiritualist movement in particular. So to me, when I think of women of the paranormal, I think of this like kind of it's this wild, outrageous behavior that was completely permissible in a very uptight society, and that we get to kind of build on that. And today we can just sit here and go on a ghost investigations and talk about mermaids, and I mean, people probably bat an eye, but it's not like they're batting an eye because we're women. They're batting an eye because we're talking about mermaids. So they really kind of did a lot of groundwork for us. So pretty amazing.
Yep.
Extremely amazing. And I got to tell you, you mentioned something about Halloween, because you were on my show last Halloween, I think a year prior, which are always great shows. We got to plan a big Halloween show with Varla Ventura.
Yeah. Just do it. Don't do it on Halloween, because that's my sacred night.
No, definitely not.
In honor of Halloween, you really I've already started celebrating it. I've got pumpkins growing.
Yeah, no, Varla Ventura has Halloween stuff up in August.
Honestly, I never take it down. Let's be real.
Well, I did not want to divulge that, because that was for you and for everybody. Sorry, we don't talk politics on this, no matter what your persuasion is. I love all people. I love all people. I'll just leave it at that, because
getting chippy in the chat.
Well, I had dumped someone's been a member for a while, but I don't. That's one thing I don't deal with. So goodbye and good luck. This has been a fantastic show, Varla.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Really nice speaking with you. Nice speaking with you also, Krista. I love your show. So it's
well, I appreciate it. And I know, because I know Krista like a sister, she's going to have you come on as well.
For sure.
I mean, I got some blondes.
There you go.
Some blonde hairs in there.
Varla is a blonde.
Yeah.
Varla is definitely a boo.
For sure.
Hey, Varla, we got about 5 minutes. I was a little distracted with what was going on there, but tell everybody where we can find you, where your books are found, and anything else you want to add to help, increase your volume of followers.
Yes, yes. Okay. So, first of all, my website is varlaventura.net. My books are available anywhere books are sold, so you can get them at your local bookstore. You can get them on Amazon. I do have a series of ebooks on Amazon, but the print books, they're all still in print. There's 6 of them, soon to be 7. My forthcoming book, I do not have a pre-order link for that yet, but that will be coming out in April 2025. I also have a podcast called Midnight Stories with Varla Ventura. Got 1 episode on there, to be honest with you. So that's a goal to get I'm going like 1 every 6 months at this point. But on that, I actually expand on these stories of these historical women, as well as I have a whole series that I've written in conjunction with the new book that'll be coming out in April. And that book is called Enchanted Plants, actually. And it's not just about plant lore, but it's an exploration of fairy and folk tales through organized by plant. So I have all of these really gruesome fairy tales that didn't make the cut in the book that I'm just going to record and, put explicit on it and release it in my podcast. And then as far as anything else going, I am appearing in person in real life at OC Paracon. And that is October 12th, I believe. That's the only physical engagement I have so far.
What is OC Paracon? Where is that?
It's in Orange County. So it's basically in Anaheim. And it's actually, the theme is Women of the Paranormal. Patty Negri will be there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's a wonderful, amazing woman. Taps Paranormal Investigation crew. It's going to be quite the lineup. So I'm pretty honored to be part of that. And that'll be, tickets are already on sale for that. And I post stuff about that. And then you can find me on the socials like Instagram and Facebook, or, I post things on there. And that's about as far as I can get with social media.
Well, I know that you suck on social media. Because, I contacted you on your 1997 BlackBerry, which is fine.
You mean my flip phone?
Oh God. I love you, Varla. It was great having you.
I love you too. Thank you for having me, and it was thank you also, Krista.
I'll be reaching out to you.
Yeah, please do.
I gotta thank T-Bone, Sugar Britches, T-Bone again, Mark Z Hammer for the awesome super chats and memberships, becoming pirates. It's appropriate since we talked a lot about pirates and mermaids and seaworthy vessels and spirits and everything else. And Varla, I can't wait to have you back in Halloween air time. Maybe we'll do something prior to that.
Yeah, that is quite a ways off.
Go on to blondes first, and then because I like to share. I like to share all my guests.
Well, it sounds great, and thank you both. It was great chat.
And
anytime pirates come up at the very beginning, I heard you talking about the very beginning, and I was like, I'm in my happy place now. I have 2 Halloween costumes that I alternate. I'll let you guess what they are.
A pirate and
a pirate and a witch.
And a witch. There you go.
I love you.
Too cold in Minnesota to try and go as a mermaid,
Minnesota,
you gotta go with the thing that's layered.
There you go.
Well, I tell you, I talked about how I love the Great Lakes, but there's one lake of all the Great Lakes that I will not go in, and it is Lake Superior. I won't swim in Lake Superior.
I have a funny story about swimming naked in Lake Superior, but we'll save that for another time.
We will save that one. And another thing about Lake Superior, of all the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, noted for it's like the Bermuda Triangle. It's noted for ships going down or getting lost and airplanes. Lake Erie is just known for sea monsters. Lake Ontario, that's Canada. I don't pay much attention to that one.
That's the nice lake.
Right. Dave Scott, that's his lake. He can keep it. Although he's on a he's way west
on the other side.
Yeah, he's on the other side. He is not on our planet. And Lake Huron is very nice, but Lake Superior has got all the creepy stuff going on. I've done like 4 stories on monsters and little people and Bigfoot and
Oh yeah,
Gugway,
it's
all
got it
from Lake
all. It's got
Superior.
shipwrecks. It's got ghosts.
It's
It's
got
got sea
alien. It's
serpents.
got
It's got
alien
aliens. It's
bases.
got it all.
Yes, it does.
It's superior for sure.
So with that being said, I love everybody came in the chat. I love Varla. I of course love Krista. And thanks to everybody that supports us and subscribes. And for Varla, for Krista, I'm BMR. And until next time, we are out of here.
See y'all. Hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
I don't think I ended the stream just yet.